Consumer Protection and Health. We have a number of governor's messages on our agenda, appointments to various boards and commissions. Here at the Capitol, I'm joined by Senator Laura Thielen, who's a member of the committee. And let's see, I see Vice Chair Senator Stanley Chang on the remote. And do we have other members yet? I think Senator Ruderman may be joining us shortly, but thank you all for joining us. And we will go right down our hearing agenda. I know that I believe our first governor's message, Kevin Wong may be joining us there. Kevin, if you're there, can you wave? Do we see Kevin? Maybe he was on and, oh, there he is. Hi, Kevin. So Kevin has, is Governor's Message 825. He's been nominated to the Board of Directors of the Hawai'i Health Systems Corporation for a term to expire 6/30/2021. He is a new appointment, and his slot is member representing the island of Oahu. Kevin has a law degree and is currently legislative liaison, special assistant to the mayor of the city and county of Honolulu. And he looks forward to working on the future of Leahi and Maluhia. Kevin has testimony and support from Hawai'i Health Systems Corporation, Oahu Region HHSC, Benjamin Park, Nancy Wong, Jenna Takanuchi, Lindsay Garcia, all in support. And we have a perennial naysayer for all of the things that have been coming up to DCCA are coming up to CPH, Gerald Silva. So it will be my pleasure, Kevin, to recommend that we advise and consent to your nomination. And thank you so much for your willingness to serve and for joining us this morning. All right, our next governor's message is Governor's Message 826. This is Gerald Ota for confirmation to DCAB, which is Disability and Communications Access Board. He's a member, currently works as the Affirmative Action Officer at the Department of Health. He has served 8 years on the Language Access Advisory Council, so he knows sort of what he's getting into. He's a lifetime member of the Hawaii Public Health Association and previously served as ex officio on the Commission on Persons with Disabilities. So I see Gerald on the screen there, so welcome. We have testimony in support from Disability Communication Access Board, from Ramala Radcliffe, from Serafin Colmenares, from Ann Ito, Dominic Inocelda, Deborah Jackson, and several individuals from the Department of Health. So I had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Oda on the phone, and I know that he's very interested in serving on DCAB. And so Mr. Oda, it will be my pleasure to recommend to the committee that we advise and consent. And thank you for your willingness to serve. Members, our next governor's message is 831. This is submitting for consideration and confirmation to the Radiologic Technology Board, gubernatorial nominee Lori Okuda for a term to expire 6/30/2024. This is a reappointment. The consideration for this, it must be a person with at least 5 years experience and certified in the practice of radiography and is engaged in hospital practice of radiography. And Ms. Okuda fits all of that. She previously served as a board member on the Radiologic Technology Board from 2003 to 2011. She's worked as a technologist and a mammographer for over 40 years. 30 years worked as a certified MRI tech and 5 years as a DXA tech. And is currently the lead DEXA technologist at Adventist. For Laurie, we have testimony and support from the Department of Health and from Jessica Maury. I had an opportunity to speak with Laurie, and I know that she's very well qualified for this position. It will be my pleasure to recommend to my colleagues that we advise and consent. Our next governor's message is Joseph Burke. This is Governor's Message 832 for consideration to the Statewide Health Coordinating Council. He is a vaccine pharmacy and account specialist with Pfizer Honolulu and an area account manager for Wyeth. So he's familiar with all kinds of drugs and their interactions. He's previously served as a member of the Honolulu Sub-Area Council. And we have testimony in support from Department of Health, State Health Planning and Development Agency, SHPTA from Ramallah Radcliffe, and Robert Lovey. And I had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Burke, and I know that he's very well qualified. So it will be my pleasure to recommend to the Committee on Commerce, Consumer Protection and Health that we advise and consent. Our next governor's message would have been 833. That one has been withdrawn by the governor. So our next governor's message is 834. This is submitting for consideration and confirmation to the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. Robert Jack Whitaker for a term to expire 6/30/2024. This is a new appointment. He represents individual with a developmental disability. He is a young adult with autism who lives in Hawaii. He strives to be a leader in employing people with developmental disabilities and is part of the Best Buddies UH chapter and Hawaii Autism Foundation. And we have okay. I understand, but I have it here. For Mr. Whitaker, we have my order is a little out of order, but for Jack, we have testimony and support from Hawaii State Council on Developmental Disabilities, from Daryl Whitaker and from Paula Whitaker. And I had a chance to visit with Jack as well, and it's going to be my pleasure to recommend that we advise and consent. I'm going to go back in time a little bit here and pick up Governor's Message 834, Oriana Samoroch, for why is this not coming up? Technology is wonderful till it doesn't work. Oriana has been appointed to the Statewide Health Coordinating Council for a term to expire 6/30/2024. And we have testimony and support from the Department of Health, State Health Planning and Development Agency, SHPTA, from Ramallah Radcliffe. And so having had a chance to visit with Oriana and seeing some of the things that she's done prior to this appointment, it will be my pleasure to recommend that we advise and consent. Our next governor's message is Governor's Message 835, submitting for consideration and confirmation of the Statewide Health Coordinating Council gubernatorial nominee, Malia Tallett, for a term to expire 6/30/2024. Malia has been serving on the Health Planning Council, Hawaii Council sub-area since 2016. She owns and practices at Ke'olakino Physical Therapy, has over 10 years of experience in a variety of healthcare settings, and volunteers as head coach of the Hilo High Girls Water Polo and is a community first aid responder. And for Malia, we have testimony and support from the Department of Health, SHPTA, from Hawaii Island Native Hawaiian Chamber of Commerce, and Ramallah Radcliffe. So having had an opportunity to speak with Malia, it will be my pleasure, colleagues, to recommend that we advise and consent to her nomination to sit on the Statewide Health Coordinating Council. Our next governor's message is Renee Riviera. Renee is governor's message 850, and she is being considered for confirmation to the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Hawaii Service Area Board for a term to expire 6/30/2024. And for some reason, her information is not coming up, but we have testimony and support from the Department of Health, from Marilyn Brown, from Adrian Howard, and from Alan Okinaka. So I've had an opportunity to visit with Renee, know that she's very interested in serving on this board, and it will be my pleasure to recommend to our colleagues that we advise and consent. Our next gubernatorial nominee is for Governor's Message 851, submitting for consideration confirmation to the State Council on Mental Health, gubernatorial nominee Charlene Naomi Crozier for a term to expire 6/30/2023. And she is an individual representing adults with serious mental illness who are receiving or have received mental health services. Charlene works as a mental health kokua in Wailuku, Maui, as a supported housing case manager. She's been a mental health case manager and Hawaii certified peer specialist benefits planner. She's very passionate about her work and looks forward to making a difference in the community. She currently is pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Psychology at the University of Hawaii, Hilo. We have testimony and support from the Department of Health, from Doreen Tautant, and having had an opportunity to speak with Naomi, it's my pleasure, will be my pleasure to recommend to our colleagues that we advise and consent. Our next governor's message is Governor's Message 852, submitting for consideration and confirmation to the State Council on Developmental Disabilities gubernatorial nominee Deborah Kobayakama for a term to expire 6/30/2023. This is a new appointment. She's representing a parent of an individual with developmental disabilities. She is the mother of Ian and is an advocate for him and other individuals with disabilities. She works as a group facilitator at Ho'omana Parent Support Group and is the owner and operator of Here to Heart Parent Consulting. She volunteers with Special Olympics and at the Windward Community Children's Council. So testimony and support has been submitted by the Hawaii State Council on Developmental Disabilities by Catherine Heath and Susan Rocco. So colleagues, it will be my pleasure to recommend that we advise and consent to Governor's Message 852 when we get to the voting part of this hearing. Our next governor's message is Governor's Message 853. This is considering and for confirmation to the State Council on Developmental Disabilities gubernatorial nominee Renee Manfredi for a term to expire 6/30/2024. She is representing an individual with a developmental disability, is a member and frequent volunteer on the Self-Advocacy Advisory Council and Special Olympics. She's also on the No Wrong Door Committee and the Transition Quarterly Committee. She's also a SAC representative on Kalailoa Networking and Feeling Safe, being a safe trainer. So Renee, we're very delighted that you are willing to serve. And we have testimony and support from the Hawaii State Council on Developmental Disabilities, from Susan Rocco, from Tracy Bender, Nip Ho, Jennifer Ernst, and Deborah L. Jackson. And I think I see Renee on the screen there. So thank you, Renee, for joining us this morning and for your willingness to serve. It will be my pleasure to recommend to my colleagues that we advise and consent to your nomination, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Our next governor's message is 854, Robert Jack Whitaker for a term to expire 6/30/2024 to the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. He is representing an individual with a developmental disability, and he is a young adult who lives with autism. And I think I started out with him, and he's been recommended by with testimony and support from the Hawaii State Council on Developmental Disabilities. And his parents also recommended him. And so it will be my pleasure to advise and consent. And I believe this brings us to the end of our agenda. And so we're going to take a quick recess and give, okay. Welcome Senator Ruderman joining us on Zoom. And so you'll hand out the vote sheets to, give a few vote sheets to everyone. That'll make it easier. Except to me. I'm not going to take votes. Okay.
Except me too.
When it's called, so we have all the vote sheets out. Okay, we'll call the committee back to order, and I'll just run the list. And whoever is taking the votes, please do so. So the recommendation on all of these nominees is to advise and consent. And the first one would be Governor's Message 825 Kevin Wong. So the recommendation is to advise and consent. Whoever has, let's see. I guess who has 825? Who has 825? Okay. Senator Ishihara, would you call the roll for us for 825?
Okay, thank you, gladly. Senator Baker?
Aye.
Senator Chang?
Aye.
Nishiyar goes aye. Senator Ruderman?
Aye.
Senator Thielen?
Yes.
Senator Wakai?
Yes.
Senator Favela?
Is excused.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. So Kevin, the committee has voted to confirm you, and we will send your name to the floor with our committee report. Our next governor's message is 826 for Gerald Ota. And the recommendation is to advise and consent. Chair votes aye.
Okay, of the members present and those on
Zoom, they're
Zoom.
present. They're present via Zoom.
And excluding Senator Favela, who is excused, all others are aye.
Any concerns by any of the members on Zoom? If not, we'll take that as a yes vote, and the committee has voted to recommend confirmation for Governor's Message 826, Gerald Ota. Our next Governor's Message is 831, Lori Okuda. And this is for the Radiologic Technology Board. Recommendation of the chair is to advise and consent. Chair votes aye.
Okay, Chair's recommendation is to vote advise and consent affirmative for GM 831. Chair votes aye. Senator Chang.
Aye.
Senator Nishihara.
Aye.
Senator Ruderman.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Senator Wakai.
Yes.
And Senator Favela is excused. Measure passes.
Thank you. Our next governor's message is 832 for Joseph Burke to serve on the statewide health coordinating council. Recommendation of the chair is to advise and consent. Chair votes aye.
Noting the excused absence of Senator Favela, any opposition or reservations to the chair's recommendation to advise and consent? Having heard and seen none, chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay. Our next governor's message is 834, Oriana Skamorich, for the State Health Planning and Development Agency, SHPDA, and chair recommends that we advise and consent. Chair votes aye.
Noting the excused absence of Senator Favela, any opposition or reservations to the chair's recommendation, we advise and consent on GM 834. Having seen and heard none, chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. On Governor's Message 835, Malia Talent to the Statewide Health Coordinating Council. The recommendation of the chair is to advise and consent. Chair votes aye.
Noting the excused absence of Senator Favela, any opposition or reservations to the chair's recommendation that we advise and consent on GM 835? Having seen and heard none, chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Our next Governor's Message is 850 for Renee Rivera to serve on the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Hawaii Service Area Board. Chair recommends that we advise and consent. Chair votes aye.
I'm going to try and do like Senator LaPie. So noting the excused absence of Senator Favela, all those present, any objections or nays to the recommendation on GM 850? Noting none, measure passes.
Thank you. Our next Governor's Message is 851 for confirmation Charlene Naomi Crozer to the State Council on Mental Health. Chair recommends that we advise and consent to Governor's Message 851. Chair votes aye.
Noting the excused absence of Senator Favela, of all those present, any objections or reservations to the recommendation on GM 851? Chair, measure passes.
Thank you. Governor's Message 852. This is for Deborah Kobayakawa for the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. And all the testimony was positive, and chair recommends that we advise and consent to Governor's Message 852. Chair votes aye.
Noting the excused absence of Senator Favela, of all those present, any reservations or nays to the recommendation on GM 852? Measure, chair is adopted. Chair measure is adopted.
Thank you. Our next Governor's Message is 853 for confirmation of Renee Manfredi to the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. Chair recommends that we advise and consent. Chair votes aye.
Voting the absence of Senator Favela, all other members being voting with reservations or rejection. Seeing none, motion is adopted.
Thank you. And I believe our last Governor's Message is 854, Robert Jack Whitaker to serve on the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. Chair recommends that we advise and consent. Chair votes aye.
Of the members present, noting the absence of Senator Favela, any voting in opposition or reservation, seeing none, motion is adopted.
Okay, I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank you, committee members, for your service, and thank you for the folks that were on Zoom. We appreciate your attending remotely. Aloha.
Thank you.
There you go.
And congratulations.